Good morning, everybody. This is the second session of our virtual ICSA conference. My name's Vincent, and I'm from the Camphill Community Glencraig in Northern Ireland, and I'm chairing this session. Daniel is the tech support, so if you have any questions logging in or you can't access something, if you send Daniel a message. We have three papers being presented this morning. The first one will be from Namrata and Hasmukh, and then we'll have who are from India. Then we'll have a presentation from Betsy, who's from the USA, and then the third and final presentation will be from Iris. Each presentation will be about 20 minutes. And at the end of the three presentations, if you have any questions for any of the presenters, you can ask them by either raising your hand and saying what your question is. You can also ask the question in the chat. So we're going to start then, and I'll hand over then to Namrata and Hasmukh.
Thank you, Vincent. Hi, everyone. Today we'll be talking about a case study from an intentional community in India, which is called EBHEL, Experience-Based Holistic Learning Environment. What it stands for, what its values are, is something Hasmukh will take you through in a moment. But the idea today is to be able to talk about a social technology called Circles, which I have been working with for the last 5 years, and its role in being able to cultivate belongingness, especially in intentional communities. So before we get started with EBHEL or the Circles, just a moment to refresh our minds about what community really means. So we would like to refer to Peter Bloch's definition that it is born of local people with unique gifts, deciding what to create together in this place. So there is definitely a large local element to the way we define community as well. EBHEL, like I mentioned, is an intentional community in West India, and my colleague Hasmukh will be talking about it, post which I'll be sharing about the Circles at EBHEL and how they have been helpful in creating belonging in the community. Hasmukh, over to you.
Thanks, Namrata, and thanks, Vincent, and welcome to all the other participants in the session today. So to give you some background, I'm a scientist. I was abroad for over 20 years. I worked on things like the world's first internet bank and video on demand and other things. But what I realized through all this is that what research we worked on took about 10 years to come into a university, let alone a school. And what got me interested here is that in this learning environment today, we are bombarded with facts, and PhD, which is research, is the last degree you do. We wanted to reverse that and arrive at the facts on their own. So this is a learning space which gives children an opportunity to explore their curiosity, not our curiosity. So that's how EBHEL was born. And then when I shared this with the parents and told them that this is what space we are creating for the children, they said, if you're doing that, so we started with learning. And then if you're doing that, they said, we want to live there too. So that is why the idea of a learning space expanded into a community. And later on, I realized that the learning space without a community is sort of incomplete because there is a social aspect to the learning. And the community provides that social aspect. But for the community to survive, we need to have livelihood. So it started with the learning, and then it got into the thing that the community has to be self-sustainable, and therefore we look into the livelihood. And then for the community to survive even longer, we need to have a decision-making model. Without decision-making, everything falls apart. Like there is there is a organization that looks at global communities. And the president of that, in one of the lectures that I was with, she said 90% of the communities fail within the first 4 years because they don't have a decision-making mechanism. So that's why we have learning, livelihood, and governance. Okay. Now for learning. which is the most important part. We have actually been doing this since 2014, so almost 10 years. And what is being practiced in Finland today, we have been doing this for 10 years, which is project-based learning. And in that project-based learning, everything comes from experience. So people say, you tell me and I will forget. Teach me and I might remember, but involve me and I will learn. So this is learning through involvement. And that's why experience-based learning by doing, not listening, not watching, but more so by actually involving the kids. And we are involving the kids in whatever they are interested in, not what we are interested in. Their innate, intuitive, and instinctive abilities, the 3 I's that we call. And if you see the first one, why be normal when you can be yourself? Everyone is born unique, and we want to maintain that uniqueness throughout the life of the child. So right now there is a saying, every child is born a genius. The challenge is to let the genius remain a child forever. And we are trying to say, oh, grow up. And we are saying, stay a child, stay inquisitive, stay curious. And for that, there is the example here, the Rubik's Cube. Most of you must have seen the Rubik's Cube. And what is on the left is seen as a solution. I'm just reading the chat. Okay, for now, I'm ignoring the chat window. So we see this thing on the left-hand side as the solution, but that is actually the problem. Everyone is reading the same text. Everyone is appearing for the same examination. Everyone is being judged by the same criteria, when each one is unique. Like the saying goes, if you judge a fish by how well it climbs a tree, it is going to fail. And we want to judge each person, not even judge, just give an opportunity for each person to reveal their talents. And I give an example here. You see this, you give the cube on the right to the world's best Rubik's Cube solver, and they will be able to solve it in 10 seconds. But if you give this, you just give that Rubik's Cube to an audience, ask them to jumble it up, give the solved cube to that world champion, and ask him to go from this left to the right one. They can't do it. So we want to leave each child unique. And this last example here that you see, the child has turned a pentagon into a star. And you can see the wonder in her eyes. So here we go with play, learn, share. And everything happens by design. But in nature, no 2 leaves of the same tree are similar. So its evolution is trying to correct our mistakes. And that is what we call forgiving design. In terms of time, the world is run by deadlines today. But that is what it does. It kills people. We want to create an opportunity where kids get lifelines. They get opportunities to see a better tomorrow. And that is what is going to help us with creative problem solving, like climate change or anything big that the world is trying to look for. And I think the young minds are the best because they are going to grow up into a world which will not be alive in. So we should give them the opportunity to determine their future, not our future. Their future is our only future. Yep, next. So this is a replica of that environment. This is actually created by an architect from South Africa who was visiting my farm. And what we are saying here is we need to be eco-sustainable. And in that, whatever we do, the construction has to be eco-friendly. And these are actual photographs from the workshop we did in January 2014. And we continue to do that. So these are the kids who are working in nature, with nature, and for humanity. So we look at agricultural produce, we look at working with online workers and having training sessions. So that is how we'll get livelihood managed and help with self-sustainability. Next. Okay, so then we come to the important point of governance. So this is an actual photograph where we had the community members come and attend a sociocracy session. Now, sociocracy, like democracy, is based on consensus. Sociocracy is based on consent. There's a difference. In consensus, if you have 51%, it's decided. But the rest 49% can go to hell. That is not true with sociocracy. With sociocracy, you need 100% consent. Now, what does it mean? So I'll just give a very simple example. We have said in our community, it will be no smoking, no alcohol, no drugs, zero tolerance. Now, during one of our sessions, sociocracy practice, one of the members said, I'm a smoker, but I love what you're doing. And I want to be a part of the community. How can I become a member of the community? So we did a brainstorming. He said, okay, you can smoke outside the community premises, and then you can come back in, but you can't smoke inside the community premises. And we asked that person, can you live with this? And he said, yes, I can live with that. So you may not agree, but you're willing to live with it. That is what sociocracy means. And therefore, in this manner, we get 100% consent. Sometimes the challenge which is there, we have put the problem, based on members' comments, it changes its entire task. And we come to a solution that is better than what was proposed before. So we start with a core. Now, in this case, gaining this sort of a module where people come to a consent situation is tough. So initially, we're going to start with a core committee, and the decision will be made by the core committee. And gradually, we'll migrate to sociocracy circles, where you can't have one big circle solving all the problems. So we will have circles based on specialty, like water management, electricity, administration. So each of these circles will then go up to the next level. And finally, they will report to a board of directors, which are again function specific. Now, we have to give room for error, like I mentioned about forgiving design. So we will be making amendments to the sociocracy guidelines as we progress. And through that, we'll keep on improving and improve the decision-making model to make better decisions. Now, there are some transition guidelines, because most of the people coming to this community space are coming from an urban mindset. And the community is set up in a forest, in a wilderness environment. So you can't pull somebody from the urban mindset, put them in a forest, and expect them to change overnight. It doesn't happen that way. So we have to have some transition guidelines. So one of them is nature shares. Nature is totally dependent on sharing. The mango tree doesn't say that, oh, these mangoes are only for me or only for so-and-so. Anybody who has access to that tree can eat the mangoes. The same way here, in the urban mindset, everybody has their own home, their own car, and so on. While here, we are based on sharing. So the space is shared. Whatever agricultural produce, we do collaboratively, and we share. Again, we are not competing. We don't want one person to say, oh, your house is there, I'm going to build a better house, or I'm going to do this better. We are all in it together. And nature, for example, if you have a coconut tree, it takes 8 years to get the coconut. You can't use this technology and say, oh, I'll get a coconut from this tree in a year. So that is the other guideline. Next is equality to balance. There is a huge obsession with equality in the world today. And we are all born different, but we have equal opportunities. So equality goes to opportunities. But basically, the example I give here is if the 5 fingers of our hand were identical and equal, we wouldn't be able to do 90% of the things we are doing today. So therefore, we need balance. They are different, but balanced. So same holds true for members. We will be different, but each one will compensate for the shortcomings of the other. We want to move from sympathy to empathy. Again, we are not doing things out of pity. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of the other member who is going through some pain, and then see what it is to feel that pain, and then come up with solutions. Last is from fear to passion. A lot of things today are based on fear. People are driven by fear. If I do this, then these are going to be the negative outcomes. We are saying just do what you love and do more of it. Okay, next. So this is actual photographs. So you see on the left is known as the hypar. It is made from bamboo. It is hyperbolic paraboloid. It's so it's 40 feet by 30 feet. If I go into meters, it is 12 meters by 9 meters without any pillar in the middle. And I'm right now sitting in the hypar as I'm delivering this presentation. On the right, we have geodesic dome. This was patented by Buckminster Fuller from California. So though we are in the wilderness, we are at the leading edge of technology. Here you see things made from bamboo. And on the left is a vertical axis wind turbine to generate electricity. We make bamboo furniture. We have solar water heater. And on the extreme right is a pond which is designed based on aquarium technology. So these are stone walls made from local stone, and they are sealed together with silicon, which is used in an aquarium. And we have just made a small pool. And behind that, you can see there's banana plantations, there are hills. It's a very promising environment for a community to grow up and support eco-sustainability. Okay, next. So now I would just say that at this point, I have described about Abel, but the members have to feel that they are belonging to a community, their voice is heard, and they are a part of a movement. And for that, I will request Namrata to take it from here on.
Thank you, Hasmukh. And seeing the pictures that Hasmukh shared, I just want to share that Hasmukh is currently sitting in the incubation center, which is really the experimental space for the community. And a major part of the community is currently virtual, while people do get together for community meets and workshops. But we did find that there is a need for people to start experiencing belonging even before they move in physically together to cohabit the space which is being built. The word belonging, as per Peter Block, is twofold. It can be taken as something which is relating to ownership, and it can also be thought of as relatedness, to be related to and to be a part of something. And keeping these two in mind, the social technology of circles is something that we are exploring, and I'll talk a bit about how that has worked. So ownership in community stems from a deep sense of relationality, and that's what circles help in creating. Trust is the soil in which the seed of belonging grows, and through meeting on an ongoing basis in the format of circles, people have been able to develop trust. Circles build trust, strengthen relationality, and propel people towards action, which becomes a very critical aspect of communities which are coming up. The
Namrat,
way to define...
Sorry, Namrat, can I just say you have 5 minutes left?
Yes, absolutely. We have that in mind. Thank you. The way we define a circle is really a regenerative social field where people gather at a chosen recurrence for a common purpose. Members work in unison as a dynamic system, giving meaning and shaping their collective experience. And this is really the premise for creating belonging. Now, the working of a circle, some of us may have experienced in formats such as the World Cafe, Authentic Relating, Art of Hosting, and these are really different flavors of circle work. But typically a circle is led by a convener. People meet at a fixed time and day at an agreed frequency. Ideal is weekly. There is an enrolled group of members, so it's not an ever-changing mix. There is a pre-decided theme to every meeting. However, there is a flexibility in the agenda and the proceedings. We have circle guidelines to work through and also to provide a framework. We begin with a centering before a sharing round as a check-in. And it's essentially an experience of presence in process. And those of us who would like to experience a circle, there is a session which I'm hosting day after tomorrow on the 17th. And I'm inviting folks to come in and experience what a circle might be like. When we hosted the Conscious Living Circles at EBHEL, we had 7 participants meeting bi-weekly for 1.5 hours. The stated intentions were really seeking calm, mindfulness, and mental well-being. That's what people were really looking at. The themes that we covered were ranging from what community means, working through conflict, living with differences. And some of the takeaways that participants mentioned were gratitude, interconnectedness, a heightened level of consciousness, and mental well-being. Other than that, there was acceptance, freedom, self-care, positivity, happiness. So certainly there were takeaways which people were not really expecting, and that's a very typical outcome of circles. Some verbatim feedback that people had to share is listed here. They were able to share their thoughts. They were able to think of how other people were able to overcome their obstacles, and their issues were not unique to them. They got clarity on moving forward in life, and also they felt more comfortable with other members. So clearly it moved people in the direction of belonging. So far, the status of EBHEL, like I shared, it's still in progress, and I'm going to hand over again to Hasmukh to talk us through where we are just before we wrap up the session and open to Q&A at the end of the 3 papers.
Okay. So though we started this whole thought process and the concept in 2014, it took us some time to share. And again, we are in a unique concept. So while we did this, we also tried to work with international communities. So there are more than 300 volunteers who have been here from 40 countries. And right now we are in the process of starting the community space at the end of this year. We have got a transition space almost ready, and then we will move to the space by the end of this year. So these are any further details people need to contact us.
So with that, we come to the end of our session today. I just want to say thank you very much for this opportunity. Looking forward to having some folks participate in the circles day after tomorrow, and Hasmukh will be here for any questions towards the end. Back to you, Vincent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Namrata and Hasmukh. It sounds wonderful, your community in India and what you're doing there. The houses, the buildings look really beautiful, and how you look after the land as well. That's really beautiful. So thank you very much. So the next person who's going to present is Betsy. Is Betsy ready to give her presentation? I know it's very early in Berkeley. It's probably 2 in the morning there or something. Betsy, are you there?
I am here.
Hi, Betsy.
And I'm grateful to be. I was saying that I practiced by staying up late last night and having a cup of coffee,
All right.
At 7 or 9 p.m. or something like that. So greetings from Berkeley, California. I live in Berkeley co-housing and for 20 years, and before and since then, I was a community development researcher, and my own experiences and desires to understand what is this sense of we-ness that I felt as a very young woman inspired me to go into higher education, and then from that became a researcher of urban communities, and then adapting myself and my work to this beautiful world of intentional communities. I am presenting you some work in progress, and it's a very different perspective than what the previous speakers. I very much appreciate and have had a chance to learn and listen to quite a few burning souls who have visions for communities that are so often very inspiring. And in my experience, and I'm going to speak mostly to my relationships with U.S. communitarians and communities, many of those burning souls don't have the ability or privilege or relationships needed to get a new community off the ground. So enormous respect for the vision and the effort that you're putting into it. And I believe that I would like to think that there might be something of value in my particular presentation, which is less about individual communities or the internal workings of individual communities, and more about how are we evolving? How do intentional communities institutionalize? Often a bad word, but institutionalization, in the way I'm going to use it, has to do with perpetuity or longevity. It has to do with the ability to survive and thrive. So why networks? Well, networks and affiliations collaborative relationships with other organizations outside of the beloved community that you create. They link communities and individuals around common vision and values. So people who might not otherwise meet or understand that they are not alone in their vision and values get a chance to meet through the process of networking, kind of a buzzword, but also the creation of organized networks that can then continue to do the work after those people are no longer in the same room, continue to do work around carriers of vision and values, and bridging relationships, bridging relationships that are mutually impactful for both community and other entities in the world at large. And particularly, I very much am choosing this to present even partial results because of I've seen opportunities happening right now around something called the social housing movement that is engaging internationally as a federation of people who care deeply about greening cities, greening rural areas, but greening human settlements into participatory communities, not perhaps the way we envision it as a bounded entity, but as far as cities and traditional communities still exist, the social housing movement is something I would like to introduce you to if you find yourself interested, and persuade, if possible, our ICSA researchers and leaders like Daniel Greenberg of GEN to take seriously some of the political opportunities to really make a difference in the world by collaborating with the rest of the world, if that makes sense. So that's why I'm looking at networks. I'm interested in past networks and present networks that currently are identified by two primary sources, which I'll get to in a moment. So institutional theory is a kind of interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary set of or approaches to looking at social organization. And it especially has to do with the sort of schemes, the routines, the rules of engagement, best practices, and particularly in the values that one group wants to see carried forward into the future. So insofar as cooperation, cooperative culture, right use of land and resources, and more humane, compassionate treatment of people in society who aren't economically privileged, and creating equality, a sense of equality among people, then institutional theory is one way that we can look at how those values have become embedded. And in this case, I start with intentional communities, look at the networks they name and organizational affiliations, and then work from other sources to see, well, how large is that network? Because researchers have mightily attempted to catalog thousands of communities. I'm thinking of Professor Tim Miller, who's who's just done a heroic effort. Where did my data source? Yeah, so my data comes from two main sources. I'm limiting this to established communities, which means they've existed for at least 2 years with at least 5 adults, established communities, living together for at least 2 years. And my sources are the Foundation for Intentional Community online directory as of 2016, just to get tedious about details, but to understand, the world of intentional communities is dynamic. New ones are being dreamed up New ones are being promoted and established and dying, and in between there's a flourishing. And so it's good for us to, I believe, to understand that cycle and the efforts to, even though a particular community may fail or live its natural lifetime, the values within it may be persisting because of the networks that we create in the process. So the second source of information is a print catalog meant to be exhaustive of American intentional communities, published in 2015, whereas the data I'm looking at from this online directory is 2016. So much has changed since then, but much is actually still staying the same, which is great to know. Let me keep going. So let me just pause for a minute. I'm going to ask my tech. So this is what I see, Rains. I can't see it.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, so can you all see, this is the types of communities that Foundation, previously Fellowship for Intentional Communities, used. And it's not even complete, but it's the largest set of, it's the categories with the largest numbers of self-reported communities. So communities that chose to call themselves or identify as co-housing, over a third. The next largest was eco-villages, not surprising. And this is just US. They identified themselves as an eco-village. Some of them identify themselves with both co-housing and eco-village. But there's also a significant number of shared household co-living communities, smaller scale, and student co-ops, and others that categorize themselves as religious, spiritual, being their primary focus, but they might include these other forms or names of community as their type. So there's actually, I don't find these categories very useful, which is why I started to look at what are the networks among them. So just briefly, in the FIC catalog or directory in 2016, the largest networks were these three. The foundation itself, some 221 communities out of, I think 604 at the time, identified as FIC, belonging to FIC in some way. That didn't mean they paid dues. It didn't mean they subscribed, but they identified as part of that network. Then the second largest was Co-Housing US, which is actually the newest network, established in 1989. It's definitely part of a global, there are global networks in other countries, particularly in Europe. But in the US, 91 entries or communities self-reported them, named Coho US as the network they primarily affiliated with. The third largest, and this surprised me, is the North American Students of Cooperation. This actually consists of many sub-networks. It's probably the most complex organized, institutionalized network because it has individual houses clustered and providing affordable self-help housing, self-managed, self-governed, cooperatively, houses usually rather than apartment complexes, but some of them are apartment complexes. But they're usually shared houses with anywhere from 10 to 30 to 90, I think, rooms with students based on campuses around the country. And those campus networks are organized into what were called intercooperative, inter-community cooperatives. And then from there, there's a national conference, a national association, and those member co-ops and the member networks are supported and pay dues to and receive financial and other kinds of help from these student co-ops. So student co-ops are their own form of intentional community. If you've ever read the Rochdale Principles, which I would love to present if there's time later, the Rochdale Cooperative Principles inspired an international movement that still exists and is actually growing again today. So NASCO is a subset of the international cooperatives movement, both businesses and housing, producer cooperatives, housing cooperatives, consumer cooperatives. But housing is one particular type of self-governing entity in the cooperative universe of network of networks. But one of the things I wanted to understand was when did these networks come into existence? I should say there's almost 24 other networks that are named in the FIC directory, and possibly double that in Tim Miller's directory. But his cataloging of associations, affiliated networks doesn't have dates of the community members, so we don't know which ones are alive and well and thriving and which ones are not. Let me just pause here. I'm getting, my mouth is very dry. And just say, is this making sense so far? Because I live in this kind of world where I think about these relationships across across different groups of people, but who in my deepest world, like satisfaction is when I can connect people who could benefit from knowing each other, or organizations that can connect and benefit their members and themselves and the greater world, if they were to collaborate.
Betsy, can I say you've got 5 minutes left?
I am just barely touching then what I've done. Okay, so to understand from the picture of the FIC directory, the number of communities in the US is growing. The number of established communities is actually a little lower than this 800, but over time, cumulatively, it's growing. And it's bigger than even FIC can track, because of another reason to look at networks. Why? So let me skip this, because the networks that, the oldest networks, the first two still exist. There's at least one community, and many, that's a Quaker Religious Society of Friends, but it's small, and it's growing smaller over time, the network of Friends houses. The Order of St. Benedict is a Catholic order, and it seems it has been expanding through lay networks, not necessarily directly related to Catholic orders, but which are nevertheless, Catholic orders are still present all around the world. I'll just skip this other one. So I wanted to share, do I unshare that? And
yeah, you can.
so I'm working on I am working on a effort to match up types of communities, to match up networks named by the intentional communities or affiliated with US established intentional communities present today, and match that up with what those networks, I'm sorry, I've lost my ability to share the screen. Let me see what I can do. Okay. It's going to take, I'm probably done. That's the problem here. So let's say, okay, so I'm working on a spreadsheet, which I resume share. There we go. Let's see. Can I see this?
Give it a moment.
So essentially, just looking at current communities, the largest network of communities affiliations in the US are Catholic worker houses. These are mission-driven, shared economies of households that have a service that does not require any particular religious affiliation, but it did come out of these houses emerged in the 1930s and have been growing and closing ever since. But there's currently 500 of them that Timothy Miller has identified. Okay, so oops, it's showing me multiple things that I don't want to see.
This is all that's shown.
Oh, okay. All right.
One at a time.
Let me see if I can scroll. It's all right. So just to understand that my time is up, and for example, but just to give an example that this does not really reveal what I'm sharing, I'm not able to quite share what I want to share, but Camp Hill Association of North America, we've identified, or I've identified in FIC communities that associate with it. I think there's 9 Camp Hills listed in the FIC Foundation online directory. There's many more, I'm sorry, 10. And there's quite a few more that might be in the CANA directory listing. If CANA is a network among Camp Hill communities, then there probably are more than 10 in the US. And it is a global network. And I believe, 100, give or take a few, is the number I've seen, but I want to get that verified. And to understand that the reach of that network, the values of the communities within it, that is just not what I want to show. I'm talking to my terrains. So I should stop and just say that I hoped to have, some of these networks here are vast. It's just there's only a few of them, or in some cases, none are present in the FIC directory. For that, I bring up the Hutterian Brethren, or the Hutterites. Those communities, longstanding and plentiful, but no community has chosen to report that as their primary network affiliation. So I'm going to close out this and go back to the, may I have a couple more minutes, or no, Vincent?
Sorry, Betsy, you can't.
Okay.
Your time's up now. But
I will.
After the next presentation, there'll be an opportunity for questions. So then you can maybe elaborate on things that you have questions about.
So what I'd like to just say is thank you for listening. And in particular, excuse me, Rains, I would like to, anyone who would like to discuss strategic networking opportunities and research networking for researchers, I would love to follow up on that, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. So we're going to go over to Iris now.
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
So, okay, the floor is mine.
Yes, yeah.
Great, thank you. So very nice to see all of you, and very interesting presentation so far. And Betsy, yes, I'm definitely interested in networking, and great to hear the news from IC, from the US. So I have news from Europe, well, a bit a different type, more on the research side. So I will share with you mainly insights from a research project because it fits very well to the topic of the conference. Here, oh, can you see it? I cannot see my own presentation. I hope it works now.
Yes, I can see it.
So yeah, better, right? Okay, so building communities for global social change. And I would like to talk today about intentional communities as social innovations, learnings and societal impact, because this was a large research project, a 4-year project we had here in Europe and Latin America a few years ago already, but still, yeah, up to date. And I want to share also the insights afterwards. So just a bit about myself, who don't know me. So since 2001, well, I lived earlier in the 90s already in student cooperatives and so on. And the community topic since then is very present in my life. And since 2001, I have researched on community from a sociological perspective at the University of Münster in Germany, where I did my diploma, PhD, and also living parallel always in communities. And since 2011, I changed to Vienna University, and there I was involved in these larger projects funded by the EU, like Transit, where we'll talk a lot today, Cosima and Lift, like smaller projects where always communities and initiatives were, case studies. So, and I lived myself also in the eco-village Siebellinden for some years. And since 2019, I'm here at the farm in Styria, in a farm community where I live. And I'm a freelance researcher now. So for me, it was always the topic about sustainable ways of living and communal ways of living. So how can this go together? And what is actually the main thing to bring this more into the mainstream? And this was also the research fundings that were going into these directions. So with my dissertation and then the EU, and then I will talk about transformative social innovation and the research findings from this project. So I think I don't have to talk about this. You all know where we are. And I would define that eco-villages are a certain kind of intentional community. And of course, it's fluid. It's just in this research project, we had to choose a network, and that was the Global Eco-Village Network. So we researched communities that were part of this network. And still, I think with most of this that I'm coming up here is also for intentional communities, for others that are probably not call themselves eco-village, as Betsy introduced the different kinds just before. So, and to remind us a bit, what is the potential of intentional communities? Voices of scientists in the last decades. So Share, for example, called them social movements. Then Joshua Lockyer talked about developmental communalism through intentional communities with their dynamic nature, a process of striving for their utopian visions and changing this utopian vision by living and working on it together. And Susan Brown introduced these as cultural critique and revitalization movement for the society, yeah, so that there is an intervention into society by intentional communities. And at University in Münster with Professor Grundmann and myself and colleagues, we researched them from a sociological point of view and distinguish between like natural communities like families. They tend to subordinate to society, and also more traditional ones like monasteries. We also did some surveys with monasteries. So they were intentional communities in the past and still are in a way, but they're not this societal impact anymore. So eco-villages, intentional communities are striving for intervention and creation of society. well, of course, this is an entire discussion we could, but today I will focus on the social innovation aspect. And myself, I described intentional communities as social-ecological transformation experiments in my PhD, which was in 2008, with their experimental approach, their social practices, where we heard already a lot in the 2 previous lectures, their structures, decentralized, democratic consensus, and so on, and their intention, of course, a pluralistic philosophy, striving for socio-ecological ways of living and integrating different perspectives in the community. So my PhD in 2008 with the title Social Innovation for Sustainable Ways of Living, Intentional Communities and Eco-Villages as Experimental Learning Fields for Socio-Ecological Sustainability. And at this time, my colleagues and my professor, my supervisors, they said, social innovation, why don't you like this term? And I said, yes, it's a good term. And indeed, in 2012, the European Commission came up with a new research program and other programs where they said, okay, social innovation, that's a new term. And it's much important to solve the wicked problems of today, because technical innovations are not alone, cannot solve these problems anymore. So, and in one of these foundation programs, we got this research project Transit, Transformative Social Innovation Theory, funded from 2014 to 2017, 4 years, with 13 partner organizations, 35 researchers from 11 countries in Europe and Latin America. It was led by the Dutch Research Institute for Transition Studies in Rotterdam. And we had the read. We had the task to develop a middle range theory of transformative social innovation. And therefore, we chose 20 global networks from civil society. You see here all the labels of them. And from them, 100 local manifestations. So, and I had the lead on the study of the Global Eco-Village Network. So I won't talk much about the other networks today, that would be too much, but the research findings are a compilation of all this, more or less. But I will focus on the Eco-Village findings. So here you see a first overview that these networks are all working on different boundaries between non-profit and profit, public and private, formal and informal. And I think especially the Global Eco-Village Network, actually, you should say on all these 3 borders. To combine these different sectors. And it's called the third sector in political science that brings this together and develop new new connections and new structures in society. So, and the Global Eco-Village Network, as I said, here you find the reports that might be interesting to have a look at that we came up with. And our local eco-village cases were Bergen in the Netherlands, Vindhorn in UK, Schloss Tempelhof and Siebenlinden in Germany, and Tamera in Portugal. So you can all find reports under these research questions here. So now I want to directly dive into the theoretical frame so that you can see, I mean, the communities, most of you are familiar with them anyway. So I today want to make the focus on this structures, how this social change is happening and how these initiatives contribute to it. So in our research findings, on the first level were that there are game changers in society. There's a financial crisis, there's a climate change, there is the ICT revolution. And these initiatives, they respond or relate to these crises, not necessarily directly, but they work with different methods that I will explain later. For instance, new social economy, low impact living, and open source. Well, the latest one with ICT revolution is not so much the issue with the communities, but the first two ones. So new forms of ownership, business models, exchange, and so on came up. And of course, with food and agriculture, well-being, energy, and so on. So, and we asked, okay, how is this actually happening? So, and we came up, okay, it's about social relations. Social relation is the center of this whole thing with transformative social innovation. And social relations are happening with knowing, doing, framing, and organizing. And if there is now a change in social relation with social innovation, we have new forms of knowing, doing, organizing, framing. And so we went into these initiatives in the eco-villages and so on with a certain set of questions to ask these initiatives, what has changed in these areas? And we came up then with a conceptual framework to describe also how these practices are outreaching out of the community into the society, into the social material context, into the dominant institutions, and how far they change those. Yeah. So, and transformative social innovation is a change in social relations involving new ways of doing, organizing, framing, and knowing, which challenge, alter, or replace dominant institutions. And with institutions, it's not just, I don't know, the municipality or the parliament, but it's also social institutions like the marriage or a village or something that is not so fixed by law. Yeah. So, and this is all happening in a specific social material context. Yeah. And yeah, as I described already, to see here some overview. On the left side, there are the game changers, system innovation, social innovation. And on the right side, you have the actors. These are the individuals also in the initiatives, then the initiatives, communities, and the networks, the global networks like IC and GEN. And then there is happening on different levels: governance, social learning, resourcing, monitoring. So this was a bit conceptual. Now I want to give you some examples. Yeah. So in eco-villages, there is new ways of framing and doing happening. And you see here, that's on two principles, on two levels. They change the habits and the infrastructure, yeah, the framing and the doing at the same time. And this is, of course, much easier than individuals in the city try to change their habits, but they live in the infrastructures there. Community life is incentive to save energy. The infrastructure is a full-featured village to program, yeah, as a frame. Yeah, and you know all these examples, I guess: organic, vegetarian food supply, regional, and all these things that, of course, provide these new frames for easily change also the habits and the doing. Car sharing here you see, and this is from Sieben Linden, most of the photos you see here from the Buffet, the ecological vegetarian Buffet we have there, and so on. So overview: eco-villages as field for innovative social relations. Yeah, it starts with the intention that there is unity and diversity as a value, cooperation and sustainability as values. And then next level is community building and conflict resolution. Here, team building, all these methods that we heard from the Indian colleagues, also sociocracy and community building, or we process, social forum, nonviolent communication, and so on. And then it is realized in the community structures that we have properties owned by the community unit, charitable non-profit units with all the residents as members, elaborated forms of decision-making, where the responsibility and influence is balanced, and so on. And all this is transferred and multiplicated by disseminating these skills and knowledge in education centers, social skills, also via media a lot today. You will find a lot of videos on communal living on YouTube and all the social medias. And there's also working together with UN, EU, and these kind of larger institutions. So, and
sorry, you have 5 minutes left.
Okay, 5 minutes left. Yeah, we also built this critical turning points database, and I really recommend you to have a look into this because it's always possible to have second analysis with all these data we have collected there. We have from all these 100 initiatives, we have asked them for 6 critical turning points in their history. Here, for example, is Even Linden, and they described in detail what has happened there and why and which actors were involved and so on. And this really shows with what kind of topics the initiatives are dealing with. And here you have the overview because the main topics and, well, critical and problematic issues they have is around trust, reciprocity, equality, collectiveness, cooperation, sharing, solidarity, inclusion, and so on. So all these social values, actually. Yeah, and this is really the main challenge to build all this and the work, of course, communities have to do. Yeah, and I think we can all, confirm this, living in community. And also we have done studies that many people longing for community, but they more looking for a cozy nest. And they need to be informed and educated on these, community capabilities to really learn what it means to live in community. Yeah, and I want to go into this, but there are also interesting research in the area of sociology describing that the life world has been colonized over the hundreds of years, and that in our society, it's at least in the Western societies, it's probably much better in the so-called developing countries still, but there is still a colonialization of the life world going on by the economic values. Yeah. And the key learnings is, as I said, building a solid social material context, social awareness, community building, and also a critical issue I found how this community space can be protected. Yeah. And most of the communities I researched have like newcomer times, like a year or so. You need to be as a newcomer before you can become a member. So, or you have different kinds of membership. So that's also an interesting thing. And it takes time that these niche innovations become mainstream, but it's happening on 3 levels. The individual level, people coming into these communities as visitors or living there as members. Then there's a transfer into the region by business contacts, for example. And then there's a transfer on the global level through media, social networks, the political activities, and so on. Yeah, here we have some nice graphics produced in this project, of course, how these initiatives respond to the economic crisis, the climate change crisis, and so on. And well, finally, I hope I have 1 minute more. Now, my last slide. Because this project is now 7 years ago, and still we have so much data and we have so many publications on different topics, I really recommend you to have a look into. And I observe that there is a danger now that eco-villages and communities are collected by other interests. Like they get more and more financial subsidies by institutions like the UN and EU. And it's all about climate change and CO2, at the moment, reduction of CO2. And the ecological and economic problems are much broader. And I guess you know what I mean. And I see that also we as researchers are responsible to clearly show our values and say, okay, we're not doing research just for these financial things. I mean, this is in Europe very strong right now from the the calls for research is, yeah, a lot about CO2 reduction and so on. But the important aspects, decentralized societal structures, yeah, full-featured settlement, human scale, and egalitarian, self-organized ownership and power structures, land, real estate owned by the inhabitants, non-profit communal legal frames like associations, cooperatives. I think we have to emphasize this a lot because, yeah, these smart city concepts or eco-cities that are, yeah, going to be built right now, it's the eco-village idea and so on, but it's something really different, I say. And yeah, this is my final statement on this. And I hope I could give you some interesting impulses, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for, yeah, being able to present here, and thank you, ICSA and the chair. Thank you for listening. And here, yeah, topics that you can download. It's all download for free. transitsocialinnovation.eu, and also my website and, yeah, the database. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iris. It's interesting what you finished with, because this whole question about eco-villages, like funding coming from the EU and the UN, it raises some dilemmas for communities. And that was one of the suggestions maybe for the next ICSA conference in Portugal. So maybe that's something, Iris, you could sort of follow up what's happening with that. But thank you for all the presentations. And now we'll have the opportunity for people to ask questions, and then the speakers can maybe elaborate a bit more on their presentations. So how we'll do this, good, Iris, so you've closed your presentation. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. You can also put questions in the chat as well.
I will also put the links into the chat, so you will see.
Yeah, if you put the links into the chat, that would be very helpful. Yeah. So is there anybody with a question for any of the speakers?
So I'll ask my fellows. Oh, Marta had a question. Then I'll go, since I spoke.
So Marta?
Yes, thank you. I have a question to Iris, because you were mentioning some methods that I don't know about. If you could say something more about we process. It was in the parentheses when you talked about nonviolent communication and social forum, which I understand, but we process was a new word, and when I Googled it, I didn't catch the right things.
Yeah, thank you. Great. So we process, I think it's called here in Germany, the Wir-Prozess. It's more short term for community building process. After Scott Peck, you know this book by Morgan Scott Peck, he described this community building process in 4 phases, like pseudo-community, conflict, emptiness, and true community. And this is actually the V process. So
okay, I learned about that in the session 1A. So
yeah, exactly. That's it. That's the same. I can put it in the chat as well.
Thank you.
So may I respond, Chair?
Yes, yeah, go ahead, Betsy.
It's a follow-up. I would like to caution, and I'm surprised to hear that Scott Peck's work is being used. I have never found his work to be grounded in reality of actually people living in community together. He was working from, as far as I could tell, a framework of people who came together for short amounts of time and had a transformational opening, which I've experienced with groups, but they don't necessarily last or translate into living a life together with the values that, felt so free and easy. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to why you would choose a psychologist who's left. He was influential, but I don't know that he has left us with any actual living communities.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
tell me more.
Yeah, sure. He was a psychiatrist and he coached, I think, more Christian local communities like churches, right?
Oh, no, I wasn't aware of that. I thought he
Yeah,
was
I know. Yeah,
self-help.
I
Okay,
mean,
you know more.
I was part of some of these processes, and it
Yeah.
was really, it's a very nice experience. And I just know from the German-speaking area that there are some people giving workshops on a regular basis and people going there just for a weekend. But there is also a quite successful community, the Schloss Tempelhof, that I also researched. Where you can find in the research description, well, in English, yeah, you can read this. I described a bit the process, and it was really very fast starting community. In just 3 years, 4 years or so, they had 100 members buying this entire small village. And in Germany, it's really a big thing, because the real estate, it's not so easy to get something like this. So it's really an extremely successful community, and they were working with this we process. They coined the term we process.
Okay.
And their members had they had to take part in 6 of these processes per year, so that, and it was the base of their community kit.
It's good to
So
know.
it worked somehow, but they might have changed it a bit here and there. And it was not the only one, of course. They had other methods.
So it just briefly, I know there are other, that's beautiful, and that's a foundation, that experience, that practice, and that form of gathering. Thank you. It reminds me a little bit of the circle method, which I've experienced, and I'm assuming it's related to Hasmukh's and his partners' efforts, that they've chosen a method of bonding. So I'd be interested to hear, did you all consider using Scott Peck's model, like Tempelhof, or the circle work, which I'm not sure exactly. It probably comes from some of the same lineages of group process work. So, but I'd be curious to know more about that. Your choice of circle work as a bonding.
Okay. Thank you for that question. So what we have done is were looking for a decision-making model. And we looked at all the things, dictatorship, communism. We looked at the broad spectrum and the pros and cons of each. And we wanted to have a involved decision-making process. And the only thing that fit when we were looking at various things was sociocracy. Now, sociocracy, unlike democracy, in democracy, you may not know the person who has been elected, and the person who has been elected may not know you. But in sociocracy, it will only work in a situation where everybody knows each other socially. So that is one fundamental criteria, and that is what a community is, where the people know each other socially. Second is the decision making. So once you know each other, then you say, okay, how do we make decision making? And I don't want to go into the detailed process, but we were lucky enough to have John Buck, who's one of the leading practitioners of sociocracy, based out of Washington in the US. He was traveling to India, and then he conducted a sociocracy session, and he's one of the most experienced persons in this field. So we were lucky enough. And he conducted a workshop, and we went through the process, actually with the live community members, live problems that we were facing at that time. I'll give you the example of smoking. Same way we had to go with veg, non-veg, because, India is very big on vegetarian. So how do we handle those type of things? Religion. Different members are practicing different religion. So how do we handle that thing? Create a common religious space. Like one of the things that came up in that discussion was there is a space for faith. One day it is one religion, next day it is another religion. And the religion that does the practice there, everybody is welcome. But when they vacate that space, they take away everything out of there. And the new one comes in and does it. So there were a lot of issues that came up. So I'm discussing some real life examples that we faced and we went through, and we find that sociocracy works. Having said that, it takes time to mature. So in our case, for the community, we have sort of got a rough framework saying that for the first 3 years, we will have a core community for decision making. We won't go into sociocracy right away. That's what I shared on the slide as well. And then after 3 years, slowly and gradually, we will get into the sociocracy model. One more thing, very important thing, which has not come up in the discussions, but I'll just say it quickly, is how do you get members into the community and how do you get members out of the community? It's not everything works all the time. So you have to be very careful in choosing members that get into the community. So there is something known as a quarantine period. And the quarantine period, from all the research that we have done, is 6 months to 2 years. You wouldn't allow anybody who has not been in this community and living for less than 6 months. Now, in our case, we don't have that luxury. So initially, we are just going to say, people have been here. So one condition is you should have attended a sociocracy workshop, you should have lived for at least 7 days in the community space, which is where I live right now, and experience the minimalist lifestyle, the eco-sustainable lifestyle. And then the members together say, okay, can we induct this person into the community? Once the community has started, and we got delayed for over 3 years because of COVID. So now we will start this year. And when we start, we will implement this quarantine period. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
I have a direct question to you.
Okay.
Yeah, with the sociocracy, you said the people know each other socially, yes, of course. And is it also, I mean, in Sieben Linden, we had the habit to elect, I mean, all people can be elected, also those who maybe don't want to. And this was so great because there were like shy women who thought, no, I cannot do this. And they were elected for president president, yeah. And it was so great. It was really very good effects. Are you doing this the same or?
Yes, that is one of the tenets of sociocracy. So in a short 5-minute or less, just 2-minute thing, is even the initial election. So in the sociocracy circle, there is known as circles. You need to have a minimum of 8 members in a circle. Okay. You elect the facilitator. Who is going to facilitate the meeting? Correct. So there is a temporary facilitator, and then everybody elects the facilitator. And the way the election happens is on a piece of paper, you write your name and the nomination you give. You can nominate yourself or you can nominate somebody. Then through all this process, you elect the facilitator and you say, okay, who has got how many nominations? And the person that gets the most nominations can say, sorry, I don't want to be a facilitator. Correct? The question you asked. And then it is up to the members of the group to say, see, we think that you are a good facilitator because of X, Y, Z. And then that person will rethink and say, okay, I will take it up. Or the person says no. Then you go through the process with that person, not in the nomination list. And then so it is a very fair set of things where everybody has the opportunity to say no or to say yes. And it's facilitated by the members. And each member, it's all based on experience. I loved the process. And most of the members who have been through it feel that in a social setting, and also there is one more thing that I just want to emphasize here. We have set the upper limits for the community. Okay, because normally people think that, you can grow infinite and it will work the same. It doesn't. Okay, so what we have said is our community at the maximum will have 80 families. We'll never have more than 80 families. And the lots,
Thank you. Yeah, interesting.
The planning is organized as per that. Even the learning space, we will have maximum 300 students. We will not go beyond 300 students. If that happens, we will start another community. But this community will be limited by those decisions. Do you understand? So we want to make a replicable model.
Yeah, right. 300, that's quite a lot, but yeah.
This is quite a lot. Yeah.
Including children, so all together.
Yeah. Including children.
Did you? Well, I shouldn't monopolize, but I wonder if you looked at, I'll just say that sociocracy is expanding among co-housing communities, that, you know, they're, which is kind of surprising, but not surprising, to move away from not just 100% consensus, which almost everyone who's not done that, everyone who's had experience that I know in a community is moving away from 100% consensus. And it's interesting that you chose 300, because that's twice the size of the Dunbar number. I don't know, that's seen as
correct.
kind of,
We have looked into that.
and in co-housing, the number is usually thought for community is like 33 or 30. My community is only 14 households, 15, 16 if you count our associate members. But anyway, I'll stop and just ask, you know, if other people have encountered kind of best practices and or you know, rules of thumb, we call them, for best community size for your purpose. I don't know.
So here, I just want to
Actually,
say
could I hear from some others, Mr.
I just could give a brief answer to this, because this consensus -1, and what all these different methods that were practiced. So there is systemic consensing. Yeah, this was developed here in Styria, not far from where I am here. And it's now used in many communities. And it works not with you are for or against something, but it works with a 10-step level of resistance. So it's a very good method that really leads to a form of consensus that includes a lot of different aspects. And so I won't say more. I have put it into the chat where you can read about it or ask me. Thank you.
We have about 7 minutes left in this session. Is there anybody who hasn't asked a question yet? If they have any questions for the people who've presented? It's been very helpful putting the links into the different resources you've been using. That's very good, yeah.